Hey guys, we are in week 3 of our series, The Big Questions. A few weeks ago at MSM3D, you wrote down your big questions about faith right now. I'm going to be addressing some of those questions in the next few weeks, so keep an eye on our YouTube channel for all of that information. But first, today we are going to be talking about potentially the biggest question that you're probably asking at the start of the school year. And that is, where do I fit in? We all want to belong. It's normal and healthy and human to want to find a place where you fit in, where you belong, and where you feel loved for exactly who you are. When you're starting a new school year and you're surrounded by new people, it's totally normal to want to figure out where you fit in. And that's true anytime our circumstances change. We have to adjust and figure out how we fit in socially. That might happen if you have a new step-parent or a new foster family. Sometimes we wonder where we fit in if our friends all end up going to a different school. Or you might be trying to figure out where you fit at church. Maybe you're new to Crosspoint or new to middle school ministry, or you're nervous about signing up for small groups because you're afraid that you won't know anybody. Those kinds of things have a way of making us fear that we don't belong. And that's really because the truth is we all need to belong somewhere. We all want to feel like we have a place where we just fit in. We want to be able to walk into the lunchroom and have a group to sit with. We want friends that have a similar sense of humor to us or shared interests. We all want people to like what we post on social media. We like being part of a group that feels like a family. We want our small group here at church to be close enough where we can support and encourage each other. All of those experiences make us feel like we belong. It makes us feel like we fit in. And that is a really wonderful feeling. But the thing about that feeling is that it doesn't seem to last. Especially in middle school, you might feel like you belong one day, and then the next day you don't. Where you fit seems to constantly be shifting. You might get in a fight with a friend and suddenly you don't have anyone to hang out with after school. You don't fit in with your friends anymore. Or you might give up a goal in soccer and now it feels like the whole team is mad at you and you start to fear, do I still belong with this team? Or maybe your parents put rules on screen time and you can't reply to any of your friends on social media and you feel like you're going to get left out and you fear that maybe you're not going to belong anymore. Or maybe your dad gets remarried and you've got new step siblings and you're trying to figure out, where do I fit in this new family? See what I mean? I think the reason that we've got big questions about where we fit in is because it feels like where we fit is always changing. When we're not sure that we belong with a group of people, we can find ourselves pretending to be someone we're not in an attempt to fit in. We start acting different because it's what everybody else is doing. Or maybe we obsess over trying to dress the way that other people do so that we'll fit in. Or we can find ourselves doing things that we would not want our parents or our teachers to see, but we do them because we want to fit in and it seems like everyone else is doing those things. When we do this, it's like we're saying the real me isn't fitting in right now. So I'm going to pretend to be this way in the hopes that this person I'm pretending to be will fit in. But the thing is, that isn't the real you. At the end of the day, we all want the real versions of ourselves to be the ones that people love and accept and know. We want to belong as we really are. But if we're honest, we'd probably say that we're afraid that that will never happen. Researcher and author Brené Brown describes it this way. She says, fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be in order to be accepted. But belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change who we are. It just requires us to be who we are. And that leaves us asking, then where can you find belonging? Well, to better understand that, we're going to go to our Bible. So today we're going to look at a historical record found in the second part of the Bible in a book called Acts. And I think that this can help us answer this big question about belonging. What's cool about Acts is that It was the very beginning of the early church's story. It talks about some of the early leaders of the Christian faith who followed Jesus' teaching and made it their mission to share it with the world. One of those people is a guy named Paul. When Paul started following Jesus, everything changed in his life. And because of that, he wanted everyone to know about everything Jesus had done for him. So Paul traveled to new places to tell new people about Jesus. But there was a problem. You see, all of the original followers of Jesus were Jewish. In fact, Jesus himself was Jewish. That means that they were raised going to temple and hearing stories about someone who God would send, that someday God would send someone to save their people, that this would be a Messiah. And when Jesus showed up, they realized Jesus was the one they'd been waiting for. But when these Jewish followers started traveling and sharing the message of Jesus with other people, they ran into a group of people called Gentiles. And Gentiles just means people that aren't Jewish. They were people that had all sorts of views about God and ways of worshiping other gods. Some Jewish leaders thought that the message of Jesus wasn't even for the Gentiles. If they were starting a movement of faith, the Gentiles surely didn't belong in it. And that brings us back to Paul. Paul's Jewish and spreading this message of Jesus. See, Paul totally knew that he belonged with the Jews. He knew the message of Jesus was for him and his people. But Jesus changed that. You see, Jesus' arrival turned everything upside down, including where Paul and his people fit in. And they didn't just belong to the Jewish family, but also to the Christian family, the family of anyone who believed in Jesus. Of course, Paul was totally into this idea of belonging, but not everyone felt the same way. On one of Paul's trips was to a place called Philippi. There, he and his traveling companions encountered a woman named Lydia. Lydia was a Gentile, and based on what we learned about the way religious leaders viewed Gentiles, most people thought Paul and his friends would just pass right on by. Their message wasn't for her, right? Well, take a look at what Luke, the writer of the book of Acts, says about what happens next in this encounter. So he says, on the Sabbath, we went a little way outside of a city to a riverbank where we thought people would be meeting for prayer, and we sat down to speak with some women who had gathered there. One of them was Lydia from Thyatira, a merchant of expensive purple cloth who worshiped God. As she listened to us, the Lord opened her heart and she accepted what Paul was saying. She and her household were baptized and she asked us to be her guests. She said, if you agree that I am a true believer in the Lord, she said, come and stay at my home. And she urged us until we agreed. You can find that in Acts chapter 16. Now, this may not seem like a big deal to us, but the Jewish believers back then, this would have been crazy because not only was Lydia a Gentile, but she's also a woman. As a woman in that time, she didn't have a lot of power or influence, but there she was, listening to Paul share this message of Jesus. What he said had an impact on Lydia, so much that she wanted to follow. She wanted to join in this movement. She wanted to be in. She wanted to belong. But Lydia knew there were more than a few reasons why she might be kept out. Even if she was good with God, she might not be good with God's people. So look back at what she said. She said, if you agree that I am a true believer in the Lord. She might as well have been saying to Paul, do I really belong here? I mean, I'm a Gentile, I'm a woman. I have every reason to believe that you think that I don't belong. But I also have faith. And is that going to be enough? Can I belong with God's people? Is my faith enough? And how did Paul respond? Well, the author of Acts doesn't tell us immediately. He makes us wait a while to find out. But along the way, he talks about a time when Paul and Silas end up in prison. They get in this crazy situation. They save a guy's life, then they get out of prison. And then he goes back to Lydia, and this is how it ends. It says, when Paul and Silas left the prison, they returned to the home of Lydia. There they met with the believers and encouraged them once more. Then they left town. Again, that's in Acts chapter 16. This is a big moment because here's Lydia, a non-Jew, and her friends who had been treated they had been treated before like they were outsiders, but here they were friends of Paul and Silas. So much so that Paul and Silas went to them after this terrible experience in prison. They're confirming they're in. Lydia and her believing friends are like brothers and sisters. They belong. And that wasn't just true about Lydia. It's true about all people like Lydia. It's about everyone who wants to follow Jesus today. We know this not just because of this moment with Lydia, but because we read about it throughout other letters in the Bible. Paul actually sent a letter to Lydia's church in Philippi talking about how much the faith of Lydia's church encouraged him. In another letter, we read something Paul said later to a church in Galatia. He wrote these words. He says, "So in Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith. For all of you were baptized into Christ, and you have clothed yourselves with Christ. There is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free. There's neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." That's in Galatians chapter 3. Over and over, Paul used this phrase in his letter. He says, there is neither. In other words, those categories that some people felt like made them not belong, those categories, they just don't exist anymore. And the things that make you feel like you don't belong, they don't exist anymore because of Jesus. And knowing Jesus changes everything. With God's people, you belong. That was Paul's message then, and that is the message of the church today. Everyone matters. Everyone is welcome. Everyone belongs. That community was the early church. And it's the same group of people that we're all invited to be today, to be God's church. Paul's declaration to them is the same one we all receive today. You belong here. You don't have to do anything or be anything. No matter where you're from or what you've done or what things have changed in your life, you have a place here. Whether you feel sure about following Jesus or if you're just trying to figure it out, you belong. You belong here. Now, maybe you don't feel like you really belong with God or God's people because you aren't good enough or because you aren't from a religious family or because of things you've done. Maybe you think you don't belong here because you don't know if what you believe about all of this God stuff is even true. Maybe you feel like you've made too many mistakes to ever be accepted. Well, if you leave knowing one thing today, let it be this. You belong at Crosspoint Church. You have a place with God and with other people who follow God. You belong here. So if you are struggling with the big question of where you fit in, remember that truth and then commit to trying something this week. First, take a step toward being more of yourself. You don't have to do all of the right things or say all of the right things or act in a certain way to belong. You can be part of this community of Jesus following people exactly as you are. Be you. Our goal is for you to feel welcome at Crosspoint by just being your unique self. What does it look like being more of yourself? Well, it can be opening up to a friend in your small group or your small group leader. It can be asking questions you're afraid to ask. It could be sharing what you really think instead of what you think you should say. We want to be a church filled with all kinds of people, and that means that we need you to be you. Second, take a step towards someone else. How can you make someone else in our church feel like they belong here? For you, it may be the next time we meet in person, you're the first one to say hi. Or maybe you invite somebody to join you at our next in-person gathering. Or maybe you introduce other people that maybe aren't as familiar with some of the people you know in our church. Third, take a step toward Jesus. The woman we heard about today, she didn't start by knowing all the right answers or by doing anything to fit in. She just said yes to following Jesus. She took a step toward Jesus, and that's all she had to do to recognize that she belonged with Jesus. So I want you to try to do the same thing. Maybe for you, it's praying for the first time or reading the Bible or asking a small group leader to talk about this stuff with you. Maybe it's just deciding to keep showing up at church, to keep absorbing the things we're teaching and interacting with other people in our community. Whatever it is, commit to just one step in the direction of God who loves you and has a place for you to belong. What if this was a place where everyone could know that they belonged? In fact, that is exactly what we're after as a community. We want every person who comes to Crosspoint to have a group of people where they feel like they belong. That's our hope for every person in this community, that they can show up, be themselves, ask real questions about this whole faith thing, and encourage other people in their group to do the same. We want each person to feel like they belong and help others to feel that way as well. Can you imagine what would happen if all of the small groups and the larger group in our church were to live this out and be a place where all people know that they can come and belong. I think that it would make not just our church, but our whole community a better place. And I think that that's what God is after.